Let me say from the outset about this bill. It proves that what Republicans have said since the passage of Dodd-Frank. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is unaccountable. We hear my Democrat colleagues complain about the actions of a legal overseer of the Bureau, McHenry, and now the complaints about the Republican-appointed director, Kathy Kreninger. We're here today because Democrats regret that during Dodd-Frank that they didn't go far enough in mandating outcomes by this Bureau because they didn't consider that a Republican could actually be a leader of that Bureau. And they may not like the action of that unaccountable director. They have buyer's remorse. And unfortunately, they've decided to advance legislation that does nothing to create a more responsible CFPB over the long term. Instead of taking this opportunity to work together to bring transparency and accountability to the CFPB, the majority is moving a bill that does little more than advance their political agenda and micromanage the Bureau. H.R. 1500 codifies and recreates offices inside the CFPB, some of which are given more authority and some of which, like the Office of Cost-Benefit Analysis, are given less. H.R. 1500 also directs that Bureau staff, it actually directs what Bureau staff can refer to the Bureau as in public. Now let me explain. If you call it the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau under this bill, it's okay. If you call it the CFPB, you're okay. If you refer to it as the Bureau, you've actually broken the law under this bill. That's actually one of the more substantive changes in the bill, actually. And I don't think it's wise legislating by Congress. That represents the policy side of the legislation. One look at this bill's findings is enough to tell you that what H.R. 1500 is really about. There are more pages of findings than there are of actual legislative text. The issues they raise in the finding sections, however, are not remedied in the legislative text part of the bill. In a series of disparaging statements, former acting director Mick Mulvaney, a former colleague of ours here in the House, a member of the Financial Services Committee, and Director Kathy Kreninger are vilified as irresponsible zealots. Specifically, the text describes former acting director Mulvaney as, quote, anti-consumer, quote, destructive, and, quote, inane, only working, quote, to hamstring the good work, passion, and the capacity of dedicated staff, end quote. The findings also opine that, quote, the appointment of Mr. Mulvaney aimed to diminish and undermine the mission of the Consumer Bureau, end quote. This is a highly suspect section of legislation before this House. I don't think it's becoming of this House to opine in this way. While Mick Mulvaney may be many things, he is not inane, nor is he anti-consumer. Now, I may say jokingly that I find him destructive, probably destructive with his humor, but not destructive in the work that he achieves in public policy. I think he is a good public servant, serving our country admirably, and with the work that he did at the Bureau, he was trying to achieve the best results possible for consumers, for institutions, for financial safety and soundness, and for the economy at large. He did good work. With that context in mind, we know that this bill isn't about helping consumers. This bill is about constraining Republican directors from making decisions they believe are in the best interest of the agency. In the Financial Services Committee markup, Republicans offered amendments that would have made responsible changes to the Bureau. Had those amendments been adopted, the majority would have a much better bill. An inspector general would have provided oversight of the director, ensuring the mission of the agency is not undermined. That's important for all branches of government. Subjecting the Bureau to annual appropriations would have also ensured congressional oversight of the CFPB, or the Bureau, and a voice in the prioritization of Bureau functions. A GAO study examined the efficacy in which the Bureau meets its statutory obligations. That would have actually yielded insight into the workings of the otherwise opaque Bureau. But those amendments weren't adopted. The choice was made to move forward with a partisan declaration instead of meaningful bipartisan legislation. That is unfortunate. Thankfully, there'll be a Senate, and the Senate has a different view on this. And it is my hope that this bill does not become law. Well, unfortunately, we can't improve this legislation through a meaningful amendment process because of the nature of the rule passed by the Rules Committee. We're merely adding more political fodder for press releases as a result of this bill. H.R. 1500 will pass the House and will go nowhere in the Senate. The Financial Services Committee will then turn to the next issue. Hopefully it's bipartisan legislating, where Chairwoman Waters and I have had success in the past, and I hope we have success in the future. But to the American people, I say that the Financial Service Committee Republicans remain committed to bettering this organization of the CFPB. We will protect consumers while maximizing financial choice. We will work to advance solutions, not sound bites. And it's my sincere hope we can do that with cooperation from the majority. I ask my colleagues to join me in opposing H.R. 1500, legislation that puts politics first, not consumers. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from